Alexander the Great, conqueror and architect of a Hellenistic empire. Alexander the Great, 356 to 323 BC, also known as Alexander III of Macedonia or Alexander the Great, was a Macedonian king who conquered the Greek world, the Persian Empire, Egypt, and India, and formed the largest empire in antiquity. He was born in Pella, Macedonia, Greece, son of King Philip II of Macedonia and Olympias of Epirus. His father trained him militarily, entrusted his education to Aristotle, and associated him with the Macedonian throne from a very young age. When Philip II died in 336 BC, Alexander succeeded him as king of Macedonia. During his rule, he spread Greek culture in the conquered territories and began what is known as Hellenistic culture. Alexander's father, Philip II, held the throne of Macedonia between 359 and 336 BC. During his government, he turned Macedonia into a strong, centralized monarchy and introduced a series of military reforms that made it the leading warrior power in the region. With successive military victories, he built an army that controlled the territories that extended from the Danube in the north to Thessaly in the south. Furthermore, he prevailed over the Greek polis and created the League of Corinth and gained their support to begin the conquest of the East. During his father's reign, Alexander commanded the cavalry of the Macedonian troops at the Battle of Kyrenia, 338 BC, which marked Macedonia's definitive victory over the Greek polis. In 336 BC, Philip II was assassinated by a member of his court for unclear reasons. Upon assuming the Macedonian throne, Alexander set out to consolidate and extend the empire that his father had formed. To do this, he had to repress the Greek polis that had taken advantage of his father's death to rebel. Then, in 334 BC, faced the Persian Empire, which had once again advanced on the Greek polis and defeated its king, Darius III, in the Battle of Granicus. Since then, he dedicated himself to the expansion of the kingdom. With this victory, Alexander began to be called Magno, which means the Great. In 334 BC, the army led by Alexander entered Asia Minor and defeated the Persian troops of Darius III. Then, 2 years later, he conquered Egypt and began a series of campaigns that allowed him to prevail in the Levant, Babylon, and each of the satrapies, provinces, that had been part of the Persian Empire. In 326 BC, Alexander began his campaign to India, in which he suffered important defeats. Although he managed to extend the eastern limit of his empire to the Indus River, the soldiers of his army refused to continue fighting in the increasingly remote territories in the face of a hostile relief and climate. During his military campaigns, Alexander founded dozens of cities. He gave most of them his own name, Alexandria. The different cities were located at strategic points throughout the empire and were located at the confluence of the different trade routes that linked east and west. The best known of the cities founded by Alexander was Alexandria in the Nile River Delta in Egypt. This city became one of the most prestigious urban centers in the region due to its riches and culture. It had more than 500,000 inhabitants, mostly Greeks, Egyptians, and Jews. Alexander received all the necessary war teaching from his father Philip II. At a young age, he managed to impose himself and be a skilled military commander who earned the respect and trust of his soldiers. A characteristic military tactic of the Macedonian army was the so-called Macedonian phalanx, which involved a combat formation made up of professional soldiers trained with heavy weapons and cavalry. These military tactics required great training and discipline and were a key element in the victory of enemy armies. Ceremonies led by priests dedicated to each particular god. On the other hand, with the expansion of the empire, Alexander allowed the conquered peoples to maintain their gods, their culture, and their traditions. The Alexandrian Empire was a centralized monarchy. Under the influence of the political style of the East, Alexander deified his figure as emperor. He called himself son of Ammonius Zeus and proclaimed himself a descendant of Heracles and Achilles, mythical heroes of Greek culture. For the administration of the government, Alexander made different decisions, depending on the political structure of each conquered region. In general, he maintained local governments, both in the Greek polis and in Egypt and the Persian satrapies, and appointed Macedonian military leaders to supervise them. At the same time, inclusion within his entourage and among his trusted collaborators of different governors and military chiefs of the conquered states. In addition, he encouraged the union of Macedonian officials with local elites in order to establish a network of power that would allow him to maintain control of so many territories. With military conquests, Alexander the Great created an empire that integrated very different regions and included diverse beliefs and social customs. Although he encouraged the expansion of Greek culture, he respected local customs and ceremonies. With the creation of his empire, Hellenistic culture originated, which includes the integration and syncretism of Greek culture with Eastern cultures. However, Alexander did not live long enough to organize the society and customs of the empire he had created, and Hellenistic culture developed in the reigns of his descendants. Alexander the Great died in 323 BC, at 32 years of age due to an illness. Although there are versions that maintain that the emperor was poisoned, most accounts indicate that it was an illness contracted in his last military campaign. Upon his death, the Macedonian, Greek, and Persian military generals who had formed its intimate core clashed over the succession, and the Alexandrian Empire disintegrated into different kingdoms.